Okay, thank you guys. Welcome. Thanks for coming today. My name is Michelle Daniels. I'm one of the coaches at Autism 360, and I've been a speech pathologist for over 20 years. I'm originally from New York and was living in New Zealand for 18 years before moving to Australia a year ago. The strategies I was going to discuss today, many of them are from something called the Hanen program. Maybe you guys have heard of that before. Yeah, and I just pulled out the things that I've used in the past that I found really beneficial and really helpful. And if I'd be so curious to know as we progress your thoughts and if there's things that haven't worked for you, maybe how we can tweak it or how we can modify, because not every child's different. Not everything's going to work all the time in that moment, but we can always, it can be tailored. As a speechie, I have found these strategies very powerful for parents and caregivers. You are your child's first teacher. You are a constant in your child's environment. You can use these strategies in everyday activities, in daily routines, and this sets up a context for learning, and you'll be able to promote generalization and language skills and social communication skills. So that's that in a nutshell. Okay, so everything's shared okay, Ella, on that end? Great. Research has shown that parents in parent-implemented intervention demonstrated improved use of language facilitating strategies and decreased stress levels. So this is, I just put like this here, it's a little bit like dry, but it's just like research. It's just showing that parents are very powerful people in helping their children in their everyday communication at home, in their daily lives, at the park, the supermarket. And if you respond, especially to what the child's interested in, the child is more likely to make more communicative attempts and be more motivated to continue to remain in that interaction with you and remain engaged. If the child is increasing his or her initiations to engage with you, that same child, they're increasing their practice in communicating. And the secret is teaching children and motivating them to want to get that connection that if I do something in particular a certain way or certain ways, I may get what I want. And it's just, they don't always know. They just haven't made that connection at all. If a child is increasing the amount of engagement in the interaction, that same child is at the same time increasing their opportunities to learn from any language input. Because when the child's engaged in something they're motivated by, they're more likely to want to keep engaging with you because they're already motivated by what they're doing, what they're interested in. And that's like the secret, like the way in I have found over the years. Sorry, it just takes a little bit. So the Hanen Approach was created, it was to address research indicating that parent involvement is crucial to a child's intervention program. So I know, like as a speechie, like some of the kids, they can only go once or twice a week. And then when they come home, it's, of course, they're back into busy lives, daily routines and everything. So what I liked about this program is the simple strategies that can be very powerful. And if they're not working, how we here at Autism 360, how I can help support that and tweak it. And maybe your child's at a different level, and it's can be very broad, this program, with age groups, which is quite good. The approach advocates the natural environment, so it's things, of course, you can do, and it provides them with opportunities to communicate with the key people in their lives. So this can be like once you are implementing it, you can show siblings and parents and relatives and everybody. Yeah. So for the first thing that I do is I ask a parent is just watch their child, pay close attention. And this can be tricky because some children have restricted interests, or they're not, some parents will say to me, my child isn't playing with toys yet. But that's okay, because if they're very sensory seeking and maybe they prefer jumping up and down and they're vocalizing and they're really happy, then that's what I recommend. That's where you're going to go too. So the idea is maybe just jotting down some things or just watching. And when they're doing something that's interesting to them, and it doesn't have to be like functional play because they might not be at that level, doing that yet. So if they're just jumping up and down, they're excited, you can jump up and down and be excited too. And then you can stop and wait, and you're going to watch them. So this is kind of leading into the waiting, which I'll get more into. So the Hanen Center, they call this this strategy, the observe, wait, listen. And like I said before, it's just really good across the developmental stages, because if your child's 2 or your child's 7, you're working with what they're interested in. Great, so I'm just waiting for that to clear up. So there's 6 steps. So the 6 steps that start with this following the child's lead. So it's like you're going to copy them. So first you're going to observe, find out what their interests are, and then I'll get into the waiting after in the next coming videos about the importance of waiting. And then it's that listening to how they're communicating. It could be eye contact, fleeting. It could be it could be reaching, grabbing your hand. And then the next step will lead into getting on the floor with them if they allow you, and if they don't, we'll talk about that. And then the goal would be like eventually being able to join in and play with what they're interested in. And then it's kind of like getting them excited and you being animated, to giving them a reason to want to communicate with you when they're interested in what they're doing and they're excited and happy. So I'll just play this video. It's just a cute little video that kind of just shows just the basic steps. And again, I'm very interested to hear, like, I've been there, I've done that, Michelle, it's not working. Interrupt me anytime during this presentation to let me know, or to put it in the chat, because it helps me, and I can hopefully draw on my experience to say, well, maybe we can try this instead. And again, they showed toys in that scenario. But again, if your child isn't interested in the toys, and even if they are interested in a toy but not playing with it in what we would consider a functional way, it's a way that they like to play with it. That's awesome, because you can lead into demonstrating the modeling of how we play with toys. But the main thing in the beginning is you just want to increase their motivation to even want to interact with you all. So the main thing is, like, you can copy what they're doing with the toy, as long as you feel it's appropriate what they're doing, if you know what I mean. So any questions, anybody?
I have a question, Michelle. So my son, as I said, he turned 2 in October, and he really enjoys playing with his train set and with trucks. So he will often say, play with trucks, play with trains, that sort of thing. And he'll say, come, mummy, come and play. So that's fine. And he likes, just putting the trucks around the trains around the track or whatever. And I've tried on a couple of occasions to kind of incorporate some creative play into that. So, setting up, a train station where little people can get on, or, whatever. Because honestly, I find train sets so incredibly boring. But I mean, he loves it,
Yeah, fair enough. Absolutely.
That's his favourite thing to do. And I just wonder, I feel like if I followed this advice of always following his lead, we would only ever play with trucks and trains, because, that's his favourite thing.
Absolutely.
To do. And I just wonder what the balance is between doing that and trying to introduce more of a variety of things.
Yes, absolutely. I totally get that. And in the early days, like, this is like the early stuff. And in the early days, we're taking that child's lead. But absolutely, over time, once you have if they're verbal, either with visuals or AAC, is once they're using their words and they're in their own way, and they're telling, they're know how to engage with you and ask you, come join me, then definitely it's another level. And yes, we would want to introduce, maybe try to introduce some new toys, but maybe what I would do is start slowly. So if he's is it just trains? Is he interested in other things with wheels? Every
vehicle. Yeah.
Every vehicle. Excellent. Do you feel because what I find is the best way to increase communication and language, and it is ad nauseum, is you can use other toys, but don't get me wrong, but is to stick with this also, because this is what drives him, and you can always extend him, like you were saying, and you can model new language, and he will be motivated by that, and he'll be more likely to engage. So if we choose something completely different, you know what I'm trying to say? It doesn't mean you can't. You can choose something different sometimes, and you can just play with it yourself and make it look exciting and enticing him. Even while he's playing trains, he might not go to you right away. It might be you have to do it in a different scenario, but it might be that you bring out a new toy and you just make it exciting, and you're using it and talking about it. And he might be curious, because sometimes they don't like change and new things, and they're a little bit I'm not touching that. But if you just leave it on the table and walk away, sometimes, and just do that owl, you might find that he might pick it up. And does that make any sense?
Yeah, totally. It's always something I've kind of thought about is, how to, I mean, he does, to be fair, he does enjoy Duplo, and he will play Play-Doh for a little while, but yes. His go-to is always the vehicles and things. So yeah, and I as I said, I try and introduce new concepts to that, but it's not his that's not his preferred way of playing with the trains. He just really likes to, just get the trains.
Right. And if you comment on what he's doing, and you just comment and you're just modeling, do you he might be listening and not looking at you. Sometimes it could be a couple things. Sometimes they can't look and listen at the same time to absorb and process what you're saying. Sometimes it's just more ritualistic, and they're not in that mood, they just want to self-soothe or calm, and they're just kind of doing that. It's that repetitive. I don't know if that's what you're finding with your son, and he's just doing that with it. Or
well, no, he does like to do things, and I do kind of commentate on what's going on and things like that. But there's just, I don't find there's that much to work with, in the sense that it's just the same conversation over and over again, about the carriages and this and that,
Yes. Yeah. Does he have access to the whole thing all the time? Is there a way that if you...
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you, I'm just trying to think, like, would it work, like, it might not work because he's very used to this if this is a very attached toy, whereas where you give, like, maybe only certain amounts and leave the rest in a box where he can see, and maybe he has to, like, request for some of the pieces, and maybe you can be like, where does it go? And maybe, like, have him try to help you, like, build it, if he would be engaged with that, would be willing.
I think I've got a new kind of toy storage system now where it's actually everything's a lot more accessible to him. So that means that he really just kind of goes for the stuff that he likes. So it might be a question of rotating a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another thing you can do as well. Absolutely. And you can try, like, to think with the trains, like, is he interested in anything that you do? Like, if you put people in it or any little toys or other bits in it, or you can model, you can use some trains yourself with him, and maybe just try to see if he'll be interested in the way you are doing the trains, and modeling, like, maybe like people getting on the train, just things like that, like changing it. Does that help, Sarah? Yeah,
it does. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
And if there's anything that you like, no, Michelle, not satisfied with that, please let me know in the chats. And because I'm one of those that likes to get to the bottom of it, and make sure that I've given you something you can walk away with. So once the parent, like, observes, wait, listen, and Sarah, you might find that your child's, like, past some of this. So, but just let me know. I can still answer your questions throughout that are, like, next levels. The parent should respond, as we said, by taking the child's lead. And of course, the closer the language input is in response to what they're focused on, the more meaningful it will be for them. So I know, Sarah, you might have to, like, be like, it's just finding how to create, more scripts with the trains. And then, like, I like to write, the changing up toys. That's a good one. If you can find what he's interested in, as long as he's interested, that will help. When we imitate, so we copy what the child says or does. And again, Sarah, you would be doing the next step. You'd be modeling that higher level language, and when we playing alongside him, maybe with your trains, modeling different things. And when we imitate the child does feel validated and is more likely to continue doing the things that they'll be more likely to continue doing that thing. So it could be like like a certain sound that they make, or an action. And when you copy that, this is in the early years, they might be excited because you're making that connection with them. You're going into their world. Imitation can increase engagement, as the child may find what you show them interesting. And what the idea is here is not verbal imitation. It could be gross motor, like we're trying to meet the child where they're at. And the idea is you're getting this back and forth, so that you would get later on in natural conversations. So it's like even like turn taking with language, like when we have with our babies on the changing table and they're babbling and they stop and you babble back and then they babble back. And this is kind of what this builds into, like, and then it advances from there. When we imitate the hard to engage child, that child may just stop. Like, I've seen children act like they're totally not interested, and I might be playing alongside them with a different toy or the same toy. And sometimes I can see like a fleeting eye contact, like when I use that owl really intently. And I know that they're like taking it in, and it just might take time. You decide which behaviors, of course, that are appropriate or not for imitation. So depending on your child's level of language development, again, you might be just imitating actions, vocalizations, or their words. So if your child is using only actions and pushes your hand, just say to blow more bubbles, of course, this goes back to that opportunity like where you would say, you want bubbles? But I get children that are echolalic and they'll say, they might just repeat that back. You want bubbles? And so in this situation, I'll always say, you speak for the child in the first person. So you want to be like, I want bubbles. And if your child is beginning to use words, repeat back what your child has said. And you can, say, I want bubbles. Or if your child, for example, if they say ba, 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 you can model bubbles. And then it could lead into, I want bubbles. Or you can say, you want bubbles. But again, if they repeat back, you want bubbles, you want to teach them to speak in the first person, like you're helping them speak for themselves. So whatever you're imitating is what you want them to say if they're echolalic. Does that make sense? Cool. It's good to say what you think your child would say. And I found this a lot working with children over the years. Even if I was slightly wrong, obviously not when they're in a meltdown, like getting into a meltdown and they're really upset. But I did find like if I was really watching during play, I was on the floor with them engaging, and I could just learn to read like what they were trying to maybe say. It's like an intuitive thing. And I felt that really helped that connection, and it could help decrease frustration. Again, not always if they're really like, I want it now. It's more just when you're preempting before you get to that level and you see, they're looking at me that, I think they really want me to do more of that. Or it could be anything, but it's just that watching your child and looking at those nonverbal communications, if it's just fleeting eye contact, reaching out, taking your hand and leading you is a big one, anything like that. That's that opportunity where we're going to model. And we don't expect perfection here, and we're not wanting to get your child into a state of meltdown. We always want to give them the item or blow the bubbles for any communicative attempt that they make in that moment. So that's why you have to owl, like really look at them, because you might be like holding the bubbles and, I want bubbles. And you're waiting and you're looking, and they might not be able to say it. But even if they look at you, you blow right away, because you're just trying to make that connection, that if you try to make that interaction, you may get what you want.
I just wanted to ask, Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I see a lot of parents who don't necessarily assess the hand dragging as a communicative attempt. They I guess maybe because it's it's not a verbal attempt, they're not sort of assessing it in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a typical so say a kiddo was doing a hand drag to the cupboard for a snack.
Absolutely.
What do you think would be like a really concrete suggestion for what a parent could do in that moment to capture that communicative attempt as a learning moment? Absolutely.
And I hope that when you see the next videos, I'll be getting to that, but I'll answer that quickly. Absolutely. And it also depends on the child and where they're at. Like if they're pointing, great, we go for it. If they're not pointing. But the main thing is that you want to follow them to see what they're trying to get and what they want. And you want to see and see what they're trying to get at. And if you think you would model again, like, you want cookie? Or if they're echolalic, you might be, I want cookie. And then you might, and depending on where the child's at, it could be a visual, it could be AAC. But the idea is we're going to move away. My job is to help the parents move away from just the dragging into functional communication, where they can learn to request in appropriate ways, so that you get past that. So it might be through pointing, it might be through a word, it might be through a visual. And I'll talk about how we can set up the environment to encourage that motivation to communicate using communication temptations. Yeah. So I won't stick with this slide very long. It's just that I want people to embrace the communication milestones associated with echolalia. And that's a topic for another day, but with greater understanding, it is a wonderful communication milestone, and connections can be established using Echolalia. And usually I recommend is you can speak in that first person to model for them, even if they don't understand it yet, through your actions and over time. And you can even use their own scripts, but that's for another day. Play with your child. I'll get to it, Ella, but this is just basically just reinforcing that the importance of play, and that you can get a different set of toys and play alongside them to try to get the child to at least feel more comfortable. If they're not comfortable, like with you engaging directly with them, you can just play next to them with something that might interest them. So no matter if you're actually waiting for instructions. Okay, this also goes back to why. So I will go ahead because I think I've said that, the importance of waiting. So Ella, I can skip over some of this if people feel like this is kind of like I'm sort of know this already, that importance of waiting and where you stop, and you can wait. And the idea is you want your child, if they can use a word, or they can use their body language, just sort of like withholding and waiting. And it's just that idea, like if you have the bubbles in your, like a couple times you might, say ready, steady, go, and you blow. And then after a few times you might be like, ready, steady, and you just wait. And if they go, you blow, or if they look at you, you blow, or if they say bubble, bubba, whatever, you blow. And that idea is you're going to increase their motivation to want to start communicating in any way. And that's what we want initially, is just, and then we lead it into what Ella was saying, like if they're taking your hand to go in the bubbles, you know what I mean? You're going to teach them how we might use a sign, or use a word, or use anything that will take them away from the grabbing and the snatching, to knowing that they will get what they want, but we're just going to get them excited first, show them, wait that little bit. And that's why we reward them quickly in the early days, because we want to keep them on track and motivated. And then as they wait longer and longer, it gets a little bit easier. They start to understand the value in this, because they know they're going to get what they want. But then it's easier then to, like, I find, implement some of those more appropriate strategies. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is where we set up the environment. So this is kind of leading into like that hand pulling. So we want to implement strategies and create multiple opportunities throughout the day. So we want your child to come to you so that you can shape their taking your hand and leading you to what they want into like appropriate ways to request. So first it helps to have those temptations. And it could be a cookie, it could be anything, but if the child can reach everything, and this is not about withholding from children, like, main meals, right? It's nothing like that. It's just about getting your child, keeping things like snacks, I find are great, certain toys, and you want to just keep them out of reach, because if the child has nothing to request or ask for, and they have access to everything, they're very self-sufficient, they'll just keep doing that. There's not that motivation to want to come to you, because it's not natural for them. And that's that core trait that we want to help support, so that we can shape that request. Any questions? And I'm sorry if I've missed things in the chat. Okay, great, sorry. So first, again, you need to find a toy, activity, or a snack. So this is just talking about finding and throughout the day, it could be certain toys, it could be certain snacks, and then it's saying during that activity, you model to the child so they can learn how to communicate. And your model should be slightly, I already said that, slightly more advanced. You do it at the child's level. So if your child's not speaking, again, you would model like that cookie, but you want it to be so when you're at that pantry with them, there's either a visual on the pantry that you're working on, or they're signing, or they're pointing. And because otherwise, if it's just on the counter and they grab it, that's a missed opportunity. And if you give them like the whole bag of chips, again, that's a missed opportunity. So I kind of drag every step out. Like I'll drag out the chips. So I might like open, like I would help have them, gesture open or try to say open wherever they're at. So they have to work for that. And then it might be I take out 2 chips and put it in the bowl, or I just give them the 2 chips. And then the idea is the idea is not just that you're working on just more all the time, but the idea is that you want to increase those interactions and those appropriate ways to request. So it could be, again, like an action, a sign, but you're always modeling that slightly advanced level than what they're doing on their own. Does that all make sense, guys? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so this is the environment, and I find this very powerful. Ella, I don't know if that's kind of leading again into your question. If you take so you can take some of your toys that your child really likes, and if they're very rich, like I was saying to Sarah, if they're very ritualistic, like there's certain things that are harder than others, it's got to be something that they don't, get really upset with, that if they're really attached, where it's more of a self-soothing calming, if that makes sense. It's got to be something that they enjoy playing with because it's fun, not just that ritualistic, repetitive, or because they're self-soothing. Does that make sense? So I don't want you to feel like you're failing, like if you're trying to take something away now that they've had, but just thinking about what things you can put away. And again, if your child's not interested in certain toys, again, it could just be that we have to step back again and just be at that level. Like if they're jumping, say on a mini tramp, you're jumping with them and you stop and you wait. And if they go, then you model, jump, and then you stop. And I find that it starts that turn taking. And then again, over time, like taking the child's lead, you get out of that, you move on to shaping that request into more functional by you modeling. And is it going to be a sign? Is it going to be a visual? But yeah. So take some of your child's toys and you can place them in clear bins that are visible, and you can put them like on a shelf. And sometimes I even put like a visual on the item so they know, or at least they can see like what it is if it's blocks, for instance. And the idea is your child can't climb on a ladder and get to it. They know it's there and they're excited, and they need to come to you. So that gives them a reason to come to you, to request. And so your child needs to request. So and again, it could be a picture, a word. And the idea is you want to make it exciting, like, ooh, blocks. And wherever they're at, if they're pointing, great. You can, let them point. You can model, yes, blocks. I want blocks. And again, every individual child is different who I work with. So I tweak it just right for them, if that makes sense, depending on where they're at and what's working. Like some children don't like hand over hand pointing due to sensory reasons. So I might have to change that up. Maybe we're just using they're able to be helped, like if they want to touch the visual themselves, or sometimes I pick them up so they can see the toy more clearly and they're going like this, and I'll be like, more, not more. I'll be like, oh, trains, I want trains. And again, it's just where the child's at and not getting them to the point of frustration. Wherever they're at, you give them, if they look at you, if they grunt, whatever, you bring it down, and it's working at the child's level. Don't allow the child to access things like food. Like I find like snacks and the iPad are really good, and the TV, if possible, with the TV, but so that your child needs to request to use them. So, or allowing only limited use and where you can put it away. So they'll need to request to use the item again. So the idea is, and then it's a whole nother ball game when they don't want to give it back. So that could be something else, like Ella knows, like first then visual, and that's a topic as well. But the main thing is that the idea is to just get that motivation so that they have to come to you, which will provide multiple opportunities for them to have to come request, and that you can shape that request. And even like turning it on with the iPad, like I won't just give it to them, like I'll sit with them first, and then like I try to get them to even like request wherever they're at to turn it on, and then I might model like what do you want on the video, like see what they're searching for, and say they're great at it and they pick what they want. I might model, I want Thomas, but something like that. Provide obstacles. For example, you can put like something in front of the door or have the door locked. So like when your child like wants to go outside, like that's a big one. Like if there's a chair in the way, like, oh no, move chair. Sometimes I use a lot of times the word stuck or fix it. And when they get easier, if they're verbalizing, they start to use that later. I find that you get them going in that right direction, however they can communicate it. The idea is they're motivated because they want to maybe go out to the park. But you want to use every opportunity for them to try to have you open the door before going out. So it's using like every much you can to stretch and give them those multiple opportunities. Taking a toy that your child really loves and you can start playing with it. And when they indicate they want to turn, however they indicate, it could be, again, the body language, the reaching out. Again, you can model that car, I want car, or car please. And once they attempt requesting the item, again, it's just going back to that reward. And it's just over time, I find this really helps them and with getting motivated and wanting to come to you for things, which then sets up future language development, because now you've given them a reason why they want to communicate at all, because this is like the core basic things that we need to get to those next steps. I believe like where Sarah's son is, where we're using words already or communication, in any way to, come here, play, and he's playing with the toys and everything. Give your child only some parts of an activity. So it could be like, even like if your child's drawing already, like, or doing an art project, if they're at that level, it's like holding back maybe certain things that they need, like certain colored crayons. So, if they love colors, they can indicate that they want the green one. However, they communicate sign, gesture, pointing, words, but you're always encouraging that next level up in communication by modeling the language to them. And when the child begins to indicate that they realize pieces are missing, you model again the language they want to use. For example, track, please. And then you can hand them another track. So this is that idea, like if you had, say, like some track pieces missing that they need, they're trying to make a bridge and they're very motivated to doing that. And it's like all of a sudden they can't make it. And they might, but not before they have a meltdown, because then it doesn't work. But it's just that preempting, getting in there, like when you read their body language, like they're like, huh? And it's just getting in there. Oh, what's wrong? Oh no. And you never know. You might, if you get eye contact, great. If you get an, oh no, it's fine. Bridge, where's bridge? And then again, if it's locked in the box, again, it's open box. Hold the bridge up to your mouth. Or if they can look at your eyes, great. If not, that's okay. If they're looking at your nose or your cheek, that's awesome. You're just making that connection that, oh, I might get what I want. Oh, great, mom's got that bridge for me. And then they're excited, they're motivating, and then you can put that bridge, you can even hold that bridge. And before you put that bridge in place, it could be like another opportunity, like ready, steady. And then if they might go, or go, and you put the bridge in. And again, with the train, up, wait. What do? Do they indicate in any way? Down, 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 down. So there's just lots of, in the early years, lots of this kind of opportunities you can provide. Again, like peekaboo, like pausing during it. Do they want to indicate? Are they indicating they want more of it so that you continue? It could be rough and tumble plays, another one where you start with tickles and then you stop and you wait. And you just look and see how they indicate that they want more of it. And you don't have to always use the word more. You could be like, tickles? And then go again, and then stop a little bit later. And the idea is they're going to, however they're communicating, whatever level they're at. Because if you just keep doing it, then again, like there's no motivation. You'll have lots of tickles, but you won't have maybe any communicative attempts. But if you watch carefully and you wait and you stop, you'll definitely should see some with anything that your child is motivated by. Does that make sense? I find the swing is a great one. Holding this, swings where they're swinging and then holding the swing, and then they might go or swing and letting go. And then even counting, if they like counting, 1, 2, and then you hold it. And, you might go 1, 2, and then they'll go 3 or E, any level that they're at. But that's, again, another opportunity for any communicative attempt. Using bubbles and blowing the bubbles. And I have a lot of times the children that are not able to stay open, they start doing this independently on my bottle. And I always try to have, you can blow bubbles with them, alongside them, but I find if they're not melting down and they're comfortable, you're holding the bubbles, I'll blow some, I'll use that waiting strategy again. They're attempting, rewarding, giving that to them, closing the bottle up again and waiting, and bubbles, more bubbles, and when they're popping them, pop, pop, pop. And if they're at pop, 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 you can be like, if they're already using pop or they already use bubble, it could be big bubble, small bubble, big bubble, bubble up, bubble down. You can just keep extending that as well. I think I did say during meals or snacks, I did say that just give a few so that they're motivated to request for some more of them. And then, so if they take your hand again, so that will be faded out as they learn and to trust you that they might get what they want if they are looking at you or, doing what level they're at that's on that journey. It could be the gesture, it could be the eye contact, and you're shaping that along, it's into a more appropriate request. You can offer your food to a child that they don't like, and you can model like, no, thank you. That's another way to increase communication. You can also start eating a food that they really love and wait and see how they indicate that they would like some. And of course, again, I keep saying how to appropriately request using a word, a visual sign, gesture, based on where they're at. But the idea is we're trying to move them away from, when it comes, this is like something like a little bit later on. I find sometimes I just threw this in, parents will ask me like, Michelle, I want to have conversation with my child. They're using words, but they're not telling me how their day was at school, or they're not answering my questions. So sometimes with children with autism, they don't find they're practical. Like why are you asking me this? They don't see maybe the value in that. It's not important to them, or maybe they don't understand what you're asking, or maybe they don't understand that they're supposed to respond. There could be many different reasons. But I find if you comment on what they're doing at that moment, what they're interested in, or what they're eating, or what they're doing, I find that they are more likely to engage with you longer. And if they're verbal in any way, like using sign or words or AAC, I find that they are more likely to comment back to you. And then that can be a moment where you extend them one more word wherever they're at. So too many questions are a conversation stopper. So comments are less directive. And that's another thing. Some of our children can have like anxiety and find questioning a little bit frightening. And they can like almost freeze, like performance anxiety, like a perfectionism. And I find that when you comment on what they're doing or what they're saying, what they are saying and extending it, I find that they're more likely to do it back. And again, you start to get that early turn taking back and forth. And that leads into future conversation, which then can be taught explicitly through social skill training, like how to initiate conversations and all that later on down the road. So for every question, we say it's good to like make 3 comments or statements and this can be built into your daily routines. So yeah, and even like a communication or a chat book, if you want to know how your child was doing at preschool, or even at home, you can take photos of what they're doing and comment on what they're doing in the pictures, and they might be motivated to like pointing or saying something in the picture if they're at that level. Yeah. And then you comment back and you add on 1 more word, and then they might say something different. That's okay. And then you would, you can add on 1 more word to that. And then you start to get this more natural. Yeah.
There's a question in the chat that was,
I'm so sorry, guys. I get hyper-focused.
No, that's good. When should the hand thing stop or change, as it's the only way my 2-year-old tells us she grabs and pulls to what she wants?
Okay. It's all about implementing the strategies of shaping that. So you want to find you want to set up that environment. So I find the most successful way that worked for me to get the child to stop doing this all the time was to get things that are highly motivating, of value to them. Limiting access is what other people call it, like where they have to come to you so that you can model and shape that request from the hand pulling. So when they hand pull you, that's fine, go with it, because you need to know what they're trying to tell you. Because if you don't have a picture exchange in place yet, they're not able to, take a picture and bring it to you in another room, because I'm kind of working on things that would lead into that. You would, when you bring them to that thing they want, if they're just going to grab it right, they might take your hand sometimes and have you grab it. Like the idea is you don't want them to be able to grab it. You want to be able, like if they can tolerate you shaping their hand into a point with hand over hand, it might be that that might be the way to go. Or you hold the chips up to your face and chips, or to your mouth and chips. And it might be that your child, 2-year-old, she just does this or just looks at you. That's okay. Immediately give her the chips, and you're going to build up, so that eventually you're moving away from just eye contact. It could be that she's stuck. Some children find pointing really hard, and I can't focus just on that. So however works for your child, if the eye contact is easier in the beginning, if they can tolerate the point with hand over hand, if they can't, there's sensory strategies that you can learn in our program, to address that ability to tolerate more of the hand over hand with pointing. So it's a process. Does that answer the question, Shannon? All good. I hope that I get a little bit passionate and wordy, so just interrupt me, guys.
All good. We've just got our 5-minute warning.
Okay. So I want to thank everybody today. It was really lovely to meet you all. I don't know if I saw everybody because I had some technical difficulties, so Ella was here to rescue me. Really appreciate all your time. And if you have questions later on, don't hesitate. And it was really fun. And just remember, this is like early stuff. If this might not have been helpful, and I apologize, like for people, like if Sarah today, if this was, but my child's there already, there's definitely things that other strategies and ways, or check in our library, or if it's not there, Ella, right, we can make one for the next step. We can address where we go from. Or maybe just have an open session, Ella. What do you think? Like where people can just ask communication questions wherever their child is at, and I just try my best to support.
Totally. Them. There's a coaches panel coming up.
Okay.
In the workshop schedule that everybody can bring their questions and ask specific coaches. There'll be multiple people on there, so I think that's going to be perfect for everybody to bring their questions.
I think that would be really awesome because that was my main concern, is that this wouldn't suit everybody that might show up. And I hate disappointing people. I'm a people pleaser. So I really, so that sounds great, Ella. That gives me good comfort because, yeah, that's great.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome. So lovely to meet you all. Thank you, everybody, so very much.